90 to 2021 version, but I want to at least, I have a few connections here, in addition to the connection to the Carlsons. And we love your grandson, Brother Carlson, and it's an interesting thing to see these reassigned missionaries arrive in the mission and have to get caught up to speed really quickly with their French. But so I want to come back in case anybody's interested in kind of the situation there. But I have to say hi to the Reds, who my daughter served in the France-Paris mission and loved the Reds. So she would, I'm sure, want me to say hello to you.
Félicitations.
Ouais. Et donc, je suis contente d'être toujours là.
Ce Mercier, est-ce que vous êtes toujours à Aix-en-Provence?
Oui, oui, oui.
Alors, nous pensons que nous avons insisté à votre paroisse il y a 2 semaines.
Mais c'est vous qui... Oui.
Oui, vous étiez à la porte pour rencontrer les gens, je pense. Oui.
Moi, j'étais hôtesse peut-être ce jour-là.
Oui, c'est ça. Oui, c'est ça.
Oui.
Yeah. Oui.
D'accord. Oui.
C'était une bonne réunion que nous avons insisté. C'était bien.
D'accord.
Oui. De vous revoir aussi.
C'est amusant, oui.
That might be re-sparked at one point. And then once, did anybody serve in Béziers? There was a family that Raphael was baptized. Anyway, one day, this is when I was in college, he showed up at the bank I was working at. I was like, what are you doing here? He's like, I moved to America. Like, you can't just come here. What are you doing? You don't have a job. You got nowhere to live. He just showed up. So he was there with, do you guys remember Elder Schutz from Switzerland? The older gentleman, Charles, I think. Yeah.
Well, Coleman Street was bombed out, but their records are here in our crypt. And he took me down into the crypt, and I did indeed find the records of our ancestors. So going home. What's the alternative to going home by yourself? Did you usually have a companion to go home?
So
there were a whole group of us. We landed in Amsterdam, and then we made our way to London. And Byron Hanson, I forget, it's David Wood, were you in our group that came home through London? For some reason, your name comes to mind.
I was part of the group too. And Byron Hanson, I can't remember who the others are now.
I've got a photo of that somewhere, but we went through, and I don't know if you remember, but there had been a member that we visited. Her husband was a non-member down in Bordeaux, and she had this little dachshund that I just fell in love with. We would go visit and do family home evening and so on, and their dog had puppies, and I brought one of those puppies home.
Oh. Wow.
And it was kind of Craig, do you remember that? Was Craig?
I don't remember that. I just remember how excited you were to go home.
No, I was no more than the next guy, but but there was a dog there, and the dog made its way to Alabama. It had to be kept overnight in London because of their quarantine requirements, but the dog went with us to Amsterdam, to London, and then to Atlanta, and then to Montgomery. And the poor little animal was, I hate to say the end of the story, but my mother fell in love with it, and the dog got run over. A few months afterwards, and she fell in there. I see Roberta and John both in. Tell us a little bit about your story, because you were there in the mission field about the same time. You all came home. At what point did you get engaged and married?
Well, here's my side. He'll tell it differently. That's all right. He began his mission a half a year before I did, and since sisters served 2 years and elders served 2.5 years, we were released about the same time. President Hart was concerned about this little gold key that I wore from my boyfriend, who was an electrical engineer, and it was his fraternity key anyway. And he wanted me to be very sure and very careful when I returned to make a correct decision. So he recommended that I not go quickly. So instead of taking the plane, it was the same cost, and I took the old QE1. So it was a 5-day crossing.
Oh,
And when I landed in New York, my family had driven up from DC, and they picked me up and took me home. I never had seasickness, but when I got off the ship, I had land sickness. The whole world was heaving. So then we got in the car, and it was, 5-hour drive back to DC. I was fine then, but when I got out of the car, I had land sickness again. So they put me in a rocking chair until I recovered from that.
wow.
Then the fellow had been home from his mission for a year already, and he had me transfer my records to Maryland University so that we could be together. And then things came apart, and I left with dark glasses and red eyes, and we broke up, and I decided I want to go back to BYU. So I went back to BYU with some girls from my ward. And within the first week I was there, of course, I was out of sync with anybody I had ever known at BYU. But I was walking up to the campus from this basement apartment, and there was Elder Clayton detailing his car. And I said, "Oh, hello, Elder Clayton," because he's the first face that I recognized. And we went to a football game, and the rest is history. We have 8 children, 41 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. And
Marvelous.
as he likes to say, all that knocking on doors may not have produced truly eternal consequences, but it gave us the opportunity to become acquainted so that when the time was right, we were married. And it also gave him the language skills that we needed when we served our second full-time senior mission, which was to South Africa, where we worked in the area office and traveled to all the French-speaking areas there. And we were able to untangle some financial messes thanks to that and his training with a 33-year career at IBM. John, your turn.
In France. It was not difficult for them to figure out the difference. Yeah. So I definitely have a different accent than he does.
It's okay. The state president, we had a meeting last week with all the state presidents in France, and the Président de Pieux de Toulouse, I had a nice conversation with him, and he said, "Well, if you served in Toulouse, how come you don't have a Toulouse accent?" So,
oops. Did you tell him that it's because you've been in Paris long enough now that
because I've spent too much time around Elder Poznansky qui m'a appris le bien français, le bon français.